Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a new card to share with you which I made yesterday, so I'm super excited. This was my first card since being out of the hospital. Being able to sit at my desk again was really fun. However, I'm taking it slow because of course I can still feel the surgery. So I made this card and then I laid down for a while, but I'm really glad with how it turned out. This one is going to be my entry for the Coloring Virtuoso category from the annual card design superstar contest by My Favorite Things. I didn't add tons of images, which is definitely something that you can do for this theme. I just went for a background that is completely outside of my comfort zone using my Copic markers. Now I'm also going to, however, the background is a bit more elaborate than what I would usually do, but still I find this a sort of also clean and simple card. That was how I try to stay a bit inside my comfort zone. And how did I do that? I just made a focal point on my card base. Therefore I use my favorite stencil from My Favorite Things, being the Watercolor wash stencil. I use it all the time, and I had no clue how I was going to tackle this card, so I just did something and it turned out great. So I'm glad that I can show you. So initially I just used the lightest ink that I had at my craft room, being the gravel ink from the Stencil market, and I just softly ink blended the edges of this stencil to help me to be a guideline, sort of. And then I was going to use my markers to completely fill this background up with colors. So that was the initial idea. I think it could have been easier if I would have taken the square extraordinaire stencil or a rectangle or a circle, anything like that. But again, it's also for a challenge kind of contest thing. So I thought, well, let's take my favorite stencil. That's not going to make it super easy. But however, well, I tried and I'm really glad with the end result. So I will talk you through it. So first of all, take your favorite ink, well, not your favorite ink, but your lightest ink that you have at home, so that it will not interfere with your colors necessarily that you will be using. If you want it to interfere, then definitely take another color. But for me, it was really a guideline. I also already created some backgrounds in the past, a few, where I use a stencil as my guide, but then a stencil with Copics, you can still have like blurred out lines because that stencil is not necessarily holding all of the Copics inside that inner section. So that's why I decided today to try it out by just using a really soft ink. And then I took my Copic markers. For snow, I really love using a really soft G marker, like G with the 4 zeros and the 3 zeros. It works great. So I did that with a bit of flicking, but it also needed to stay white, so I didn't cover it completely. And then I thought maybe I can do like a sunset kind of color. So I started with yellows just above the hills that I created. And then of course one of my markers decided to just drip, which had been a while since I had that, but I was able to fix it with the colorless blender, and it was the softest marker, so I cannot complain about that. It was just a bit scary, but it was in the beginning, so if I wouldn't be able to solve it or anything, I could still start over, you know. So for the yellows of my background, I decided to go with the yellow 00 and 02. That was initially what I thought doing, and then I wanted to end up with quite the dark reddish purplish color on top, and in between I just needed to figure out which markers could help me kind of help with the transition. On the other side, doing a background like this, or in my opinion, a sky never is completely even. When it's a sunset, you see all of these lines in the sky. So I definitely used that. I traced the edge of the stencil that I first sort of ink blended, and then I used the edges to flick from there. Quite large flicks, but I didn't completely cover things. As you can see here as well with that RV29, I'm not going all the way. It's not needed. You can do it, definitely, but it's not needed. And then I thought, well, will this yellow be able to well, sort of be enough for the transition? And I didn't found that it was working, so I took this R17 to help me. It's more of an orangey reddish color, and I thought that it would be nice to go from an orangey red to the yellows. However, I still took an orange, really, to help me, and I took this darker yellow as well. So it was really a build-up. Initially, I had no clue what I was going to use as markers. The only markers that I had determined was this one, the darkest that I wanted to end up with, being the RV69, and then the yellows, where I had to work towards. And for the rest, I truly had no clue what I was going to do. So it was a card that evolved really organically. And I'm sure that if you want to create things like this, that there are other incredibly talented card makers out there that do this really often, that have like combinations ready to go for you. Well, I just decided today to step outside of my comfort zone. I already created once like a snowy kind of style, I think, but it was with greens and blues, so it was completely different. And then something that I also did here to really have all those colors like evolve towards the yellow was to also add a few of the darker markers lower and then just go around it with other colors to blend it out. Here I took that yellow red 12 to help me even more to get that transition towards the yellow, and then that warmer yellow, and then I will end up with yellow 00 and 02 again. So really, it was a build-up. And going through it, I just kept adding markers. Something that really helped me, but I couldn't show it, just to be able to go, well, to zoom in, is that hex chart. I showed it in other videos. It's the one from Sandy Elnock. It's one that you can buy on her site. You print it yourself at home on the paper that you use mostly with Copics. That's really something that can be useful. And then you can add all of the color that you have, and that truly helped me to find like markers that sort of fitted in between that purple that I wanted to use and the yellow. Without a hex chart, I don't know if I would have been able to create this card. Something else here I wanted to, well, I love the background, but initially I wanted to create like a forest kind of, but subtle, because I'm scared of ruining things if I already get to this stage. But I wanted to add some trees, and I'm not like someone that can draw things, so I really wanted a simple tree kind of background. And so what I did was, before I started on this card, was to take a look on Pinterest. Actually, I went there and I searched for a few, like it was sunset, forest, and I took some where there were a few trees in front, that it wasn't too crowded with trees, but really simple, to sort of see how layout wise I could work on this area and fill it up with trees. You can definitely add tons and tons more trees, but truly I could have stopped after the sunset because I was really happy that I got so far, but I just went a bit further, so I hope that it's appreciated for its contest. Yeah, I went a bit further. And then something that I noticed on the pictures was that the trees in front were quite dark, because of course the sunset is behind. So all the trees that were further away were lighter. So I decided my trees are one color. And then I decided to take a lighter brown from that same kind of family. It's also in the 70s, from the E markers. So I took E79 for the trees that are really close, and then E74 for the ones that are further away. And so I just made the difference with 2 markers. You can definitely add details on top of your trees, but for me this was just enough. I needed it to be dark because the sunset was behind, and Details you can add as tons if you want to, but for me it's really already outside of my comfort. I also had no clue how much trees I wanted to add, and then let's be honest, I had no clue yet what kind of stem set I was going to combine with this background. So that was a struggle behind it afterwards as well. So the thing that I figured out for myself was that, well, first of all, I'm just adding like a bit of interest here. Well, there is a snowbank, so in my opinion you can leave it out as well. But I decided to add like some sort of a grassy kind of feel just around the trees. You can add it everywhere if you want to. You can add it nowhere. It's definitely not needed. You can add other colors, but are so many colors going on my background already that I didn't want to distract anymore from that. So that is the background. And then I figured out for myself, since the background is kind of realistic, not necessarily, but kind of, I was like going towards stems from Stacy Yakula designs for my favorite things, or Tiddly Inks. But the thing with the Tiddly Inks girls was that they are really large, and I love them for that. But for my ink blended area here, it was really hard to find one that fitted in the blend, well, in my background. You can add it in front, but I wanted it to be in the scene. So I went for this older stem set. It's the Christmas Cheer from my favorite things, designed by Stacy Yakula. Incredible. And I decided for the accessories from the bunny that I was going to use the same colors as my background. So if these colors kind of look familiar, they are all used on the background as well. And actually they blend really well as well. If you want to, for the background, it wasn't needed there. I just needed to create a transition that was kind of logical. But in this case, using it for the accessories, it helped me because they can definitely be used in a combination like this as well, which I would never do thinking about it normally, because I tend to take combinations from the same color family, and here I have 4 color families on, just for my accessories. So normally I don't do it, but I really like it. So maybe in the future, if I have some time to kind of explore these kind of things more, I might find one that I want to share with you as well. That is a bit different from all of the rest that I normally create. So also for the candy here, I decided to take 2 markers from the combination already. There is tons and tons going on. So again, it's the coloring Virtuoso, but just to keep it a bit more in my style kind of thing. And well, the background is already outside the comfort. I reused colors here in this case to just have it ready to match, you know. I wasn't sure whether blue was going to match or green. I would have loved to use some green, but yeah, my background is going towards the pinks, I don't know. So just to make sure that it was working, I used this. And then for the bunny, I'm going to use one of my favorite brown combinations. It's a really warm brown. It's E37, E33, E53, E51. You know it. I love it. It always works. And the E37 on top of my standard kind of combination makes it a really warm brown. I'm doing some flicking since I added the shadowing on the right side for the accessories. I'm doing the same for the bunny as well. Everything on the right side, and then I'm blending out towards my lightest color. So I'm just doing that. Later on I will use the matching die to cut it out, and then we can play with placement, add a sentiment, and finish off that card. Just to make it as soft, because originally I also hope to be able to do some no-line coloring, but with all of the details by Stacy Yakula, I tend to not do no-line coloring when it comes to her images. I took a brown ink, so this ink that I used today was a dark chocolate ink to stamp out the bunny. It gives it already a really soft look by not having that black outline. The black outline would have worked as well, but in my head, sort of step away from the no-line coloring, it was closer to do something with brown ink. So now I'm going to take the matching dies, and then we can sort of figure it out. It's going to walk in the forest, really joyful. For the sentiment, I decided to take one out of this sentiment, out of the stamp set as well. But I'm first going to add this image. It's not going to interfere with my sentiment, so I wasn't worried about that. And then the sentiment that I will be using is the Wishing You Christmas Cheer. I think the way it is walking or running is so joyful, so it's the perfect sentiment. And I decided to have a sentiment a bit higher up on my panel, but I also wanted it to be in the scene. Since the scene above is quite dark, I thought about doing some white heat embossing. But then when I placed it where I liked it, there was like a slight overlap with that white outside kind of panel thingy. And so I ended up adding a bit of a mask on the colored area to be able to stamp with black. It was just a W, but I stamped that in black, and then I white heat embossed the rest of the sentiments on top of that colored area. So to not smudge anything and to be able to really easily white heat emboss it, I heat set the panel. Then I use my Versamark clear embossing ink, and I prepped that panel again as well to be sure it was working. I'm going to stamp it twice. I cleaned off the W, it's not needed necessarily, but I wanted already to minimize the amount of embossing powder that I needed to erase there. But you will see here there was a bit of white on top of that W. I just used a paintbrush to brush it off, and then I heat set the sentiment. I also had a few smudges around the W, which was unfortunate. But I was also going to add some white gouache splatters to represent snow. So I used my white jelly roll pen to fix those boo-boos around the W, and it's not going to matter because the white splatters will be all around as well, so it could even be white splatters from the snow actually. So I buffed off the excess from the anti-static powder, and then I'm going to take my gouache here and then add it on top. Now it was a bit of a fiddle. If you want to have really white splatters, then definitely don't add too much water. I always try to minimize that, but if that doesn't work, sometimes you have to add more, and I just added too much. So I needed to add more white gouache in the mix. And then I splattered all around. I had one bigger splatter, but it was just next to the sentiment, so it worked out fine. I wasn't going to fix that because I could have made it worse. And I just made sure to have a bit of splatters everywhere. You can tap on your paintbrush if you want to, but if you want to have a bit more control, then it can sometimes be handy to just use your acrylic block and flick it off the edge of that block. So I added snow a bit everywhere, then I could remove the mask from the stencil. And then, I had a few more on my paintbrush. So once it was dry, I could add it to a card base. And then if you want to, you can add glossy accents, glitter, anything you want really. But I decided to leave it as is. I really love how this background turned out, and I didn't want to cover it any more than what I already covered with the image and sentiment. So yeah, that is going to be my card for this year's annual card design superstar contest for the coloring virtuoso. I had a lot of fun. I'm glad that I stepped outside of my comfort zone. I hope that I could inspire you in any way by this card. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with some new crafty inspiration. Bye!